Hey everybody, hello, and thanks for being with me. I want to just talk today about creating your private space of miracles. And I'm calling this also between contractions. Why? Because before I live stream, I have to check in with myself and really feel into what I feel is happening for me and maybe for the world, or at least the part of the world that I seem to be connected to. So what I perceive is happening on an energetic and emotional basis, and even in terms of the news, is that we are between, to a certain degree, I'm not saying it's totally quiet for everybody and totally peaceful, but to a certain degree, we are actually in a quiet space. And if you've ever given birth, or you've been with someone who's given birth, or you know anything about giving birth, you know that in between the contractions, there is some kind of quiet space. It's like intensity, push, rest, intensity, push, rest. To a certain degree, it feels to me that right now we're in the rest phase in between contractions. We're definitely not over. It's not over until the birth is over. We can, however, have a huge influence on whether it's an easy birth, a joyful birth, a healthy birth, or whether it's more of a hard and traumatic birth, God forbid, which has been way too many times already for way too many of us in way too many ways. So we're going for the easy birth. And along those lines, I want to talk about the idea of creating a private space of miracles. So when we're in the contraction, meaning we're in, whether this can happen on a personal level, on a global level, a national level, being in the contraction means that things are happening fast. It's a crisis mode. It's, problems that need to be solved. Maybe they're too big for us to solve. It's very, very triggering, very triggering. And many of us have been extremely triggered about the past year and different times in our lives as well. This is a fractal being a cosmic pattern that shows up in many different places, many different ways. So this contraction, triggering, release pattern is actually part of human growth, because as we contract, as we're pressured, as we're triggered, we have the opportunity, not that we necessarily take the opportunity, but we have the opportunity to up level, to go deeper into our own inner reservoirs. You could call it the soul light, deeper into our own inner reservoirs of desire, true divine desire that comes from your core. Like, I want peace, I want love, I want abundance for me and for others. That's a soul-based desire, which is always connected to your purpose, by the way. So when we're triggered, we go in, we have the opportunity, we don't always, often we bounce out. But if we're living an expanding, transformative life, if we're living an exile to redemption life, that's why I talk about transformation so much. If we want to live a miraculous life, and I mean that literally, then we need to adopt this pattern of when we're triggered and there's a contraction, we go in to muster our resources, just like, a birthing mother does. When there's a contraction, all of her focus has to go on that, however she's going to ride it, however she's going to facilitate it, however she's going to, whatever she's going to do. Resisting it makes it worse. The analogy of the birth process is pretty accurate in many, many ways. Okay, so we have the opportunity, that's during the contraction, during the rest period in between, that's given to us in birth, as in all other aspects of this fractal analogy. It's given to us in order that we can recoup, process, rest, relax, and create a kind of a zeroing out, a zero platform where we let go of the stress of the contraction and we consolidate and just gently harmonize our being. And in that's in this in-between contraction space, for however long it is, where I think we are now, at least most of us, it's time to really focus in, not on, resisting, not on overcoming, but on going in and creating a kind of a bubble. What do I mean by that? I've experienced a lot lately that it is possible to let go mentally of all of the things that are happening in the world. It really helps if you stop listening to the news for a while. Makes a massive difference, especially if you can get yourself to stop. Maybe you already don't listen. I'm a person who I was addicted, because I'm always looking for redemption, geula, and like what's happening in the news. It's been going on for many years. The Rebbe said we need to open our eyes and see Mashiach, see redemption. So, that's one of the things that has made me preoccupied as I saw so many things changing in the world. I want to know what's changing next, what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. But in between contractions, I'm finding that it's extremely advisable and also very doable to create a kind of bubble, a personal space where instead of thinking about and focusing what's happening in the world outside and worrying what's going to be in the next contraction, brooding about what's been in the previous contraction, all of that, which we're so hooked into, at least many of us are. So instead of that, to use the in-between contraction space to focus inward, to create your own universe. How do you create your own universe? So in a quick nutshell, I'll talk more about this in this live and in future lives, but in a quick nutshell, you must connect, you must make a clear connection, shed what's going on outside of you and make a clear connection between God, your heart, your soul, and your consciousness. And then your body and your life. And how do you do that? One of the main ways to do that is to start asking yourself, really, what do I really want? What do I really desire? As I keep saying, and it's so important, the soul comes down into the body because it wants something, even more than it wants to merge into God, which is the call. The soul is like divine, comes from divine fire. The divine level of the soul comes from, there are different levels and not all are exactly divine. The personality is a level of the soul that's not always divine, but the divine level of the soul wants its divine fire. It's Gevura. It's holy Gevura. And it wants to merge back into God. So it has to be kind of seduced with God's desire that the soul takes personally to create a dwelling place in the lowest world. So what you authentically want inside of yourself, not what you don't want, not what you should want, not what you need, not what you fear, but what you authentically desire. All those other things were out of the way, no contraction. In between contractions, that clear space where you can just be with yourself and with God and ask yourself some deep questions. It's highly recommended. What do you truly desire? If all the clutter were out of the way, if everything you weren't afraid of anything, there were nothing to be afraid of, if you didn't need anything, if all the shoulds went away, what do you want? What would you do with that? What would open up for you? And when you get down to what you want, that is an indication, that's a pointer to your essence and your purpose, the reason why you're here. Okay, that said, I want to give at least an overview of a few of the keys that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave us in terms of creating miracles. So in that personal bubble, first it starts with what you want, and then it starts with raising your vibration and your behaviors, lining up your thought, your speech, and your action, the garments of the soul, and your connection with your deepest inner self and with God, so that you can actually move forward and experience different results. You might have been, the Rebbe didn't say this next thing, but you might have heard me talk about it in the past, that you can do an exercise. I've challenged you guys to do that exercise in the past of looking for lime green cars, or if you want, you can look for hot pink cars, some color that you don't normally see. Or it doesn't even have to be cars, but it's cars seem to be a good place to start because they're all over the place. So when you start, what people have experienced is, and you can do this exercise yourself, when you choose to look for something that you think isn't really very prevalent in your environment, or maybe you've never noticed one. So what happens at first to people is that they don't see any. So many people will be looking for a week before they'll find a single lime green car or a single hot pink car, whatever. So it's not enough to say that they weren't looking before, because now you're looking. So why aren't those cars there? There aren't any. But what happens, and this is really, really interesting, actually mind-blowing. In almost every case, I don't think I can think of one case where anybody who worked with this process, based on my recommendation, didn't have an experience where suddenly they see one. And often it's when they're not looking that hard, kind of out of the corner of the eye. And then when that happens, they get excited. And I say, look for more. And then they'll find a second one. And then usually if that happens the next day, if they continue, they'll see 4 or they'll see 6. And the next day they might see 20. And what is that about? What is happening? That is telling us something very, very deep about the nature of reality. At bare minimum, it's telling us that the nature of reality is not what we think it is, right? Because that's not really possible. Again, you could say, I wasn't looking for lime green cars, they weren't on my radar. And I'm not saying it has to be lime green. Maybe Brooklyn has lime green taxis. Maybe that's not the color that you usually don't see, but whatever it is, you can say I wasn't looking. But since it always seems to take at least a couple of days for people to see their first one, me, it took 3 or 4 days, and I just about gave up before I saw my first one when I first did this exercise. Within 3 days, I saw 27, and within, in just a 3-hour period. And then after a while, my world got infested with lime green cars, and I had to uncreate them, unmanifest them. That's a different story. Okay, so what is happening again? How come we can focus on something that's apparently not in our reality, and somehow it seems to come into our reality beyond just the noticing? Noticing is also very powerful. But this goes beyond that. So I want to lay this as the foundation for what I'm going to say. And I'm just going to point to a few things that the Rebbe said in terms of creating miracles, because the redemption, the shift into redemption, yes, the Torah talks about a time when there will be no more war, when Mashiach comes, the ultimate redeemer, when God will be tangible in our world, when there will be only peace, no suffering, no hunger, no jealousy and competition, cooperation, collaboration instead, that there will be no person will even need to learn from another person, because everybody will know God in the full potential, the fullest potential of mankind, of man created in the divine image. I think I said there won't be sickness, and there won't even be death. That's the state of the world that existed when the world was first created. If you believe in the Bible, if you believe in the Torah, as I do, that was an actual state of existence in when man was first created. It's embedded in our psyche. It's embedded in our energy field. It's embedded in our heart. It's why we want a better world, because we know the world's supposed to be better than this, because we remember, right? We don't like all the darkness. We're not okay with it. We want to be home. We want to be at peace because we remember. And also because our soul came down for that. Your soul came down for that. So it will be a state like Gan Eden, like the Garden of Eden, only it will be post all of the darkness. So instead of just basking in the light of God, casually walking around in a world of no fear and only beauty and infinite life and, infinite vision, instead of just that, as recipients, we will have gone through the hard labor. We've already gone through it. Now it's just time to cash in. We're in the last stages. So we will have gone through all of that. We will have transmuted all of the darkness that was at one time only in the snake to infinite divine light. We will literally be partners with God. We'll experience not just the light of God from the outside, but the reality of God from the inside. So I'm going to probably make this in 2 parts. I'll just touch on 3 different discourses from the Rebbe that I think are really pivotal, really, really key to this whole transformation process. And then I'll go into more depth on those tomorrow or at a later live, but soon. Okay, so what I want to bring out is that redemption, although it will take place on the global scale, on the political scale, on the cosmic scale, all worlds will be redeemed by what we do here, even the highest archangels and beyond. You could say the Shekhinah, the immanent presence of God itself, is in exile with us until we redeem it. So this is a big job. This is a very important job. It's cosmic. You're at the center. You're at the exact epicenter of an entire cosmos. Really. But it's also an internal shift. Again, creating your personal space of miracles. So a shift in consciousness, a shift in emotions, a shift in behavior so that we align with that new consciousness and align our emotions with it. And then our thought, speech, and action. That's a big, big, big part. And by the way, and then notice what changes. Notice what shows up. Notice those lime green cars or those hot pink cars or those unexpected gifts or those winks and hugs from God or those special, unexpected opportunities or doors opening when you didn't think they would, or, things showing up in your life that you didn't even work for, things like that, or things that you did work for, sudden breakthroughs or not so sudden breakthroughs. All of these things were meant to shift to a consciousness that is divine. Literally, Adam and Eve describes Adam as being able to see from one end of the universe to the other end. He was able to see into everything in the Garden of Eden. He was given the job of naming everything, not just giving it a random name, but naming its essence. In other words, seeing and articulating its essence based on the actual letters of divine speech that made up its core. So he was looking into each being, the animals, the plants, the skies, the trees, whatever, and seeing the divine letters generating the existence of that thing, defining it, and bringing it in, focusing it into being. Everything is created through a thickening of the light through divine speech through those letters. So Adam and also Eve were able to see into that. And that's a basic level of consciousness from which we fell because of the need to internalize the darkness that was resident in the snake and transmute it over many millennia, several millennia, until we come to these times when it's time to reincorporate that consciousness, but from a grounded warrior level. Again, not as recipients, but as total co-creative partners who have given everything lifetime after lifetime to make this happen in a very imperfect process, which has been very painful a lot of the time. So again, it's time to cash in. So the Rebbe is giving us instructions, information, and a transmission of potential in order to make this shift. So there are 3 key discourses. I'm sure there are many more, but there are 3 that I've worked with very extensively that I'm just going to touch on here, and then we'll end for today. Number 1, and this is from the Sicha of Balak from Chelik Yud Ches. If you learn, if you study Chassidus inside of Likutei Sichas, it's the 4th Balak in the book, and it talks about the time. I've mentioned this several times, but I'll touch on it very quickly now. It talks about the time when, even though nobody absorbs things in 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, or 5 times, I myself have learned that discourse maybe 20, 30, 40 times. I think about it constantly, and I'm always seeing new depths, like literally. Okay, so from there was a time when the prophet Micah talks about the time when the children of Israel were in Yarden Yerecho. They were about to enter into the promised land. They were surrounded by enemies, and they were in a state where they could not rely on human strength or human help to make it happen. And the Rebbe says that even though it describes a past event, I'm paraphrasing heavily here, I want to go quickly, not keep you too much longer, but he talks about how in the future, in the time of redemption, we'll be in the same situation that we're, quote unquote, surrounded by many nations, to the extent that we will not be able to rely upon any human help. Our questions, to put it in another way, are bigger than our answers. The crises that the world, okay, we want to stay in between contractions here, but nevertheless, we have to know this is the time to incorporate, to take the time to think, to take the time to go in, to make shifts, to change our consciousness, to learn more Torah, to work with our emotions using proven techniques that truly transform and heal, and then to align our actions, the way we think, the way we speak, and what we actually do. So the Rebbe says that this prophecy also describes the time right before the redemption when we are surrounded, so to speak, by many nations, many forces, many agendas, I'm paraphrasing, to the extent that there's no human help for it. Nobody can really change it from the ground. Got to connect. We have to connect in and up. And then he asks, what is the purpose of this intense time? When we're in a redemption process, why is it so much darker than it was, 2 years ago? Why does it seem like the world's falling apart? Because it's meant to push us into making the final shifts, the final preparations for the ultimate redemption, which I described a few minutes ago, a wonderful world of heaven on earth, literally. Not even death, much less any of the other stuff that we've had to endure for so many incarnations and so many generations. So what are those final shifts? The Rebbe asks, it is to do as the prophet describes. Stop putting your trust in man. Like sometimes I'm posting with the hashtag trust God, not government, or not governments. Stop putting your trust in man and put your trust in God. But the Rebbe takes it to a deeper level, and this is in alignment with this shift in consciousness and vision that we are talking about, that we're moving toward, that our moving toward in our personal world will facilitate on the cosmic level as well. So we are meant to shift our consciousness. The Rebbe describes that man doesn't only mean a human being, but in terms of Kabbalah, Chassidus, the mystical Torah, man refers to the supernal man, which is a level of God that shows up through the laws of nature. So we're meant in this time not only to stop relying on governments, not only to stop relying on systems, but to stop relying on God as he encloses himself and hides behind the laws of nature. We're supposed to make a shift out of relying on the laws of nature into what? Into connecting to a higher level of God, not the supernal man, but the essential light of the creator beyond and within creation, and that is called Sovev Kol Almin, the transcendent aspect of God, which is completely not subjected to the laws of nature whatsoever. Where is that found? That light? Everywhere. Inside of you, in your deepest depths of your soul, deepest depths of you, wherever you show up, inside of nature, which is funneling through the natural laws, like you drop a ball, it falls, gravity, things are, somebody has, God forbid, a diagnosis, if it's incurable, oh well, we're meant to move beyond. And even our own nature, I'm the type of person who, is good at this, isn't good at this, has this quality and capability, doesn't have, we're meant to move beyond the laws of nature. So as we move beyond the laws of nature, this discourse first in Balak, the Rebbe points out a way to do it, that is to just stop being stuck by your rational intellect and connect to your purpose, your soul's desire, your divine purpose, and the way that God lays it out also in the Torah, the blueprint for creation. Connect with it on such a level, work to connect with God on such an intimate level that it's like you and God are up here looking down at the world and using your combined resources to make out of this like situation, to envision and to align with the divine vision and your inner vision. In other words, to be a partner in creation. I'm paraphrasing heavily. All these discourses are in the archives of my school and other places probably as well. I think I've done other events where I've taught this in depth, this particular discourse anyway. But the point is that we have the opportunity and the invitation to make these final shifts out of what we call the human condition and into being a co-creative partner in enacting a divine world. How do we do that? That's beyond the scope of this conversation. But the first thing that you should do, that you could do, no, we don't want to should, we want to choose and desire. But if you desire it, and if you choose, the first thing you can do is to start to get in touch with what you really want. Ask yourself that question. If nothing was in the way, if I weren't limited, if I didn't have to be afraid, if nothing from outside could actually harm me, if I'm in the bubble, my personal bubble of miracles, my personal space of miracles, who would I be? And what would that look like? And what would I do with that then? What would I do with that then? And what good would come out of that? So you want to take yourself back through the process, going deeper inward of, to make sure that you're moving away from the world of fear. I'd like to have a lot of money. How come? Because I don't want to be poor. That's a don't want. That's a fear. That's a need. How come? Well, I want to be, thinner. How come? Because I should, because it's not good enough the way I am. That's a should. And that will cover over your desire like clouds cover over the sun. So what you want to do is move that all away, or I want to, but I can't because, putting conditions on your ability to create, that's being subject to the laws of nature. So many people already know. It's not an accident that people started talking, I don't remember exactly when, 15 years ago, 12, 13 years ago, about the law of attraction, the movie The Secret. Before that, What the Bleep Do We Know? Those were the first two pieces of media that I remember, where people, I know that, Napoleon Hill and others talked about it, and not by that name, but long before. But it became very popular and very makubal, very accepted, the idea that we can change our thoughts and our frequency, like really change our thoughts, like almost on an emotional level and even a cellular level, and that we attract things to us, like lime green cars, if you want to see a lot of lime green cars, or other things. But it takes a working with the mind to get out of the fear, the should, the don't want, the need. Okay? But now it is so popular, it kind of embedded into our culture and into our awareness that, yeah, it's possible for things to happen beyond the boundaries. I've been more than dabbling. I've been an avid consumer, a personal practitioner on a non-professional level, an interviewer of, almost a connoisseur on all kinds of energy healing. I'm fascinated by energy healing. Why? Because the thoughts that you have if you're in the correct space, in the correct frequency, there are a few parameters here, and it takes practice. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to take practice. Anyway, it's very, very possible to affect someone else's physicality through your thoughts. Prayer does that big time. There are a lot of studies on prayer. So we are seeing a world in which Soviv Kol Almin, this light that's beyond the laws of nature, is seeping in and changing the nature of nature, changing what we expect, changing our parameters around what we believe is possible. This isn't, we can touch on this. What I intend to do in these live streams is just to open up possibility, to give you a few tools, to hopefully answer questions if they're asked, and if I can, to really master these things. It's a practice, and you can learn from people who know how to do that practice. You can learn from me if you like, but to know that it's possible, and not only that, to know that it's imperative, that the purpose of these times and all the contractions and all the triggers are to push us into releasing our dependency on man, including the supernal man, meaning the laws of nature, meaning God as he's hiding himself, and start connecting directly to God as our intimate best friend. And I want to qualify that by saying it's not that God is only our best friend. God is the creator of heaven and earth, and that's only a dot, an imperceptible dot, like one in infinity. Because God doesn't have to, he's not only the creator, but creation is where he desires, where his building project, and he desires to live within us and with us in deep intimacy and love, and take us on journeys, level after level. But right now we're in the building stages, toward the very end of the building stages, and that's why crises and contractions are increasing, and we need to know what we have to do with that. Okay, so today I touched on the idea of Balak, of moving from Imali Kol Almin, the light of God that hides in the world, that fills the world. There's much to say about what that means, but that's enough for now, to the light of Soviv Kol Almin, God as he's not hiding in the world, as he's not bound to the laws of nature. And that means that as you do that, and the core piece, the core watchword of this process that I just described, this is one of the 3 discourses I'm going to be going through. The next 2 I'll do in the next slide. But the core features are: let go of the limitations of having to prove it to your rational mind. If you have to prove something, you're holding on tight. When you're holding on, you can't move. We have to find a way to use New Age terms to drop into the quantum space, to drop into the zero space, or to use Kabbalistic terms, to drop into the ayin, the infinite, undifferentiated divine potential, the nothingness. And from there we can create something new. But there has to be that space of shift. There has to be that space of letting go. And then letting go of the past, letting go, like I said in the beginning, of the previous contraction, letting go of the future, of the worry of the next contraction, and simply drop in to your own inner zero space, your own inner ayin. There, meet what you truly desire, meet God, and focus on that. And you can start with lime green cars. It's good to start with something that you, and if you've already done lime green cars, pick something else. Eagles, hawks, I don't know, pictures count. It's good to start with something that you're not too connected to, because when you're connected, what happens? Generally, we go into don't want, a fear, an urgency, a need, right? Or should. So it's really good to practice the muscle of building your own personal space of miracles, your own bubble, while it's calm. And even if it's not calm, it's still extremely important to carry on. But I hope for most people, it's at least a little bit calm. And if it's not calm, you can find a space of calm by just connecting in. There are many processes. Feel your emotions in your body. Give yourself a lot of space. Meditation, any kind of meditation really helps, meditation and prayer. Anyway, the bottom line is, and don't keep looking. Don't keep looking, because your rational mind wants always to have proof. Is this going to work? Oh, it's not going to work. How do I know it's going to work? If it's not going to work, I'm not doing it. Or I tried and it failed me. And then we go into an emotional cascade of, re-triggered traumas. That's not going to get us to the shift across the quantum bridge, the ayin space, into another dimension. And that's really where we need to go. And as soon as a few of us really get there, and understand, bring the mission with us, bring the understanding of what's happening here in our world with us, it's going to be a whole new reality. And it's going to be a whole new reality for you. It's going to be a whole new reality for everyone. The power is in God's hands, but we are the focal points. We are the receptors. We're like the channels, like the pipes that bring that power, that open to that power, and then bring that power in, and also out from our deepest inner core and our deepest inner purpose. So when we make those connections, they're made for the world. In any case, we'll leave it at that for today. If it's above your head, let me know. If you have questions, let me know. And otherwise, I'll see you. I hope to see you tomorrow. If I get back early enough from an appointment in another city, and if not, then we'll see you on Sunday. Take care.